Terve. I am Jan Nicoli. We're going to do this in English because we have my trusted friend here and our director, executive director, Joel Wanger. Say hi, Joel.
Nice to meet you all.
So just a little bit about my story and Next Step and how it all started and what we are up to today. So I was injured 13 years ago in a diving accident here in Manhattan Beach. I went for a swim. I was playing volleyball and I dove into a wave and I hit my head on a sandbar and I was instantly paralyzed. I was really lucky that an off-duty EMT saw me floating out in the water and he pulled me to safety. And soon after, the lifeguards and the firemen took me to the hospital. And before you knew it, the doctors and nurses came into my room. They told me I fractured my C5 and 6 vertebrae and that I was never going to walk again and I had very little hope for recovery. So obviously it's a very shocking and traumatic experience. In your entire life, gets flipped upside down, as you can imagine, and didn't know what I was going to do. But I had really bad pneumonia because I swallowed a lot of water, and I spent 2 months in ICU because I had 104-degree fever, and I was on a vent. I couldn't breathe on my own. But after I started getting healthy, my girlfriend, Susan, now wife, started traveling around the country looking for places for me to do my rehab. So she started traveling all around the United States trying to find the best rehabilitation center. And shockingly, there was no progressive rehab anywhere in the state of California. And that was really eye-opening to me because California is the 7th largest economy in the world. How there wasn't an amazing rehab center was just incredible to me. But anyways, luckily, we had the financial means to do it. And I had really good insurance, so we got to go to Louisville. And there I worked under the best neuro researcher probably in the world by the name of Dr. Susan Harkkavlogi. She invented what's called locomotor therapy and a lot of other therapies that we offer here at Next Step. And while I was there with her, I saw amazing results. And within a few months, I started wiggling a toe and then started getting more recovery back throughout my body. So I knew what I was doing there at Frazier Rehab was working. But then I also saw a lot of people there at the hospital that didn't have access to locomotor training because their insurance didn't cover it. And I was wondering what they were doing for their rehab and how they were going to recover if they didn't have access to these therapies. And it was really sad to see. And then I came in and found out that there's 6 million people in the United States that live with paralysis. So this is a huge issue. And then even worse, I found out that on average, people only get 31 days of rehab in the hospital. And then they're kicked out and they're sent home. And then they don't have access to any type of rehab or fitness for the rest of their life. As I'm sure you probably know, if you're living with spinal cord injury and you're not exercising, the chances of you recovering are going to be very slim, and the chances of you getting some sort of secondary complication are very high, and that could eventually kill you, whether it's something from heart disease or diabetes or getting a pressure sore or whatever. I mean, there's a million things that can happen if you're not exercising. So that's the problem. That's a huge problem. So that's when my wife and I started discussing this with Dr. Harkkavlogi, and we came up with the idea for Next Step, is why don't we take what they offer at the best hospital-based rehab center out of the hospital and put it into a community setting, so when your insurance drops you and you get kicked out of the hospital, you can still have access to all of that rehab and fitness for your entire life. And so we opened the first Next Step facility here in LA 11 years ago, and our goal is always to expand to communities across the country and internationally to make sure that anybody living with paralysis has access to the best in rehab and fitness for their entire life. We want to make sure that people can live long, healthy, and happy lives and live out all their dreams. Just because you live with a spinal cord injury doesn't mean that you can't go back to work and start families and go back to school and live a wonderful life. But if you don't have access to a facility like Next Step, it makes it much more difficult. And so that's what we're doing. We're just trying to build these facilities all around the United States, and eventually my dream is to come to Finland as well. I've already started that process, and so that's what I'm doing. So I do all of our fundraising, marketing, strategy, work with all of our other centers to figure out how we can expand. And Joel here has been with us since day one. He started out as a trainer, and now he's our executive director, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about what he does.
Great, Jan.
Hey, Joel.
Thank you for that introduction. My name is Joel Wenger. I'm the executive director here at NextStep. As Yanni said, my goal is to train our staff, train the staffs of other sites, and do all the directorial oversight of our network in order to teach all of our other staff at sites essentially how to offer what we do here at NextStep and what's happening in the realm of research. So why don't you come with me and I'll show you around the gym. 25 years ago, Susan Harkkavlogi, who Yanni went to Louisville to work with, started with another doctor by the name of Reggie Edgerton at UCLA, and they started essentially looking at activation of the human nervous system with gait training and patterning. So they actually started the entire thing with cats, mice, then elevated to primates, and then eventually started a human study. So this has been in effect 25 years of research study now that Yanni 11 years ago was able to bring into the community and actually have access to people outside of that acute rehab model of only getting people who are acutely injured and have access to one of these at a nearby or local hospital setting. So once we were able to bring this here into the community, it's given us the ability to say, look, anybody, no matter how long post-injury, if your injury is specific to something that this is going to help you with recovery, then you have access to it through this community model. So the way that locomotor training works essentially is a client is suspended in a harness above the treadmill, and you have 4 staff members that work with the client at a time. You have 1 on the hips, you have 2, 1 person for each leg, and then you have 1 person that runs the session from the computer. When the client's suspended, you can apply as much body weight or take as much body weight from the client away throughout the course of the session. And the overall perspective for locomotor training is to activate the central nervous system and work with what's called neuroplasticity, or create plasticity in the nervous system so that it can relearn a task that it's going through. So this works in a lot of different ways that you can approach this concept, but realistically the best and most advanced and really most challenging place for the nervous system would be over the treadmill. It provides the most amount of elemental change to the nervous system, but at the same time it's probably the most rigorous and most demanding on the individual. So therefore it has the best outcome for recovery for neurologically injured clients. So neuromuscular electrical stim is essentially, this is the Excite program that's offered through restorative therapies. The overall goal with neuromuscular electrical stim is the same as with locomotor training. It's activate the nervous system through a task-specific activity. So when we're on the treadmill, the task-specific activity is walking, right? When it comes to the neuromuscular electrical stim, you can take any task from sitting, trunk extending, sit to stands, sit-ups, forward reach, and grasp. You can take a lot of different tasks that somebody needs to work on, whether it's physical therapy-based or occupational-based, and you can apply it with stim, which helps to activate the nervous system, and then same concept as LT, take advantage of that neuroplasticity. So the more flooding for the nervous system for activity's sake, the better the outlook for recovery is going to be.
So how's that different than regular stim?
So the parameters of the NMES are significantly higher than parameters you're going to get in a basic like TENS unit or even IFC or even other forms of NMES. The specifics that this has been built to, it deals with extensively more amount of pulse width and hertz, and essentially what that means is that the stim that we apply here has the potential of stimulating deeper into the muscle. The main perspective that has is that it has the ability to then return a signal from the nervous system back to the muscle in order to create a response. So essentially the stim happening with the specifics of the parameters here for NMES has the ability, instead of just stimming at the muscular level, stimming at the neuromuscular level, actually having it the stimulation travel to the spinal column, back to the muscle, create that contraction, and therefore create a repeatable, almost kind of highway for the signal to be able to take as a model for recovery, right? So when you stim basic just on the, if you're just stimming at the muscular level, you're really never giving the nervous system a pathway in order to learn that model for recovery. When you're stimming neuromuscularly, you're really looking at building pathways to say, hey, I don't have this tricep connection, but when I stim, I do. And then we're working on that motion so that as we take the stim away, we can continue to keep the activity. And that, in a sense, is powering recovery for the nervous system.